welcome everyone to Product Coffee. My name is Jason Brett. I host Product Coffee almost every week here on Wednesday mornings at 7:30 one week and 11:30 Eastern the next week, so that we can welcome people from all over the world to join us. And it's a great time for product people to get together, share their experiences, connect with one another, build relationships, and help each other solve some problems. And one of the big questions that we get here on a monthly basis is really around the notion of doing great research. As a product manager, as a product person, we need to dig in and we need to understand our customer and we need to understand our user. We need to understand both. And in a B2B environment, those can be very different people in many cases. So having a full, robust toolkit for understanding your user and your customer is incredibly powerful. So today's session is going to dive into that topic, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do that, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Method, you heard Jeff Meddy here from Method just a moment ago, has been a sponsor for Product Coffee since almost the very beginning, as has Pragmatic Institute, one of the world's leading trainers of product management professionals, and Feature Upvote has been providing our ideas forum at productcoffee.com/ideas since the beginning as well. We're really honored to have those guys sponsored. If you jump over to their websites, check them out, tell them you heard about them at Product Coffee, and give them an opportunity to get to know you a little bit. That'll encourage them to keep supporting this program as well. I also want to direct you over to productcoffee.com/now. And if you go to productcoffee.com/now, what you'll find is a resource page about today's session, which will have some information about Sam, our speaker, as well as some links over to User Interviews, which is the firm that Sam works with. And there's most importantly, there are two links that I want you to pay special attention to. One is the post-event survey. When you leave here today, make sure you fill that out and give us some feedback on what worked for you and what you'd like to see more of as a general rule. And give us that feedback. It only takes about 30 seconds. And then the other item that I'd like you to take a look at is the collaborative notes document. One of the things we do here at Product Coffee is we collaborate heavily. That's the point of Product Coffee, is to get product people working together in an environment that they normally wouldn't be able to. So I'd like to invite you to open the collaborative notes document, go to productcoffee.com/now, click on collaborative notes, and that should drop you into a Google Doc that you'll have editing rights to. You can star that, save it in your own Google Drive, or download a copy at the end, or just bookmark it so that you can get back to it whenever you want to. And instead of taking notes in your own Evernote or Notion document today, I'd invite you to just link over to that document and take notes there collaboratively with your other product management peers and colleagues. If you have a question, jot it down. If you have an insight or you hear something that made great sense, even if you have a thought of your own that you'd like to contribute to the discussion and make part of the record, drop it into that document. So that's all the advertising. That's all the promotional stuff to get started. I want to shift gears now and welcome our speaker. Sam has been around the product camp community for as long as I can remember. She's built a powerful career here, both in product management and user-facing, user experience, user research roles. So I would like to welcome to the stage today Sam Young-Walashinsky to talk about some practical guidance for user interviews. Sam, welcome to Product Coffee.
Cool, thanks, Jason, so much. Really glad to be here. And yeah, this will be a similar to the talk that I gave at Product Camp this year, which was so fun to see everyone in person again. So yeah, without further ado, let me share my screen and we'll get going. All right. Cool. So basically the idea here is I'm going to be talking about user interviews, obviously, today. And there's going to be three areas. I'm going to focus on designing, conducting, and synthesizing user interviews. And the reason I love this topic is because as product people, a huge part of our job is representing the customer voice. And I want to just take a quick poll of the audience. Have you ever made a product decision based on a hunch or a deadline, perhaps, or a prayer, and then sort of secretly felt haunted by the thought, I really hope our users actually want this? And I think we all know that the answer to this problem is to talk to the users, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. We have to not only talk to them, we have to ask them the right questions and try to ask them in a way that's going to get the information and insights that we're looking for. So my goal today is to talk us through some practical methods that hopefully you can start applying at your job right away. To start off with, why should you listen to me? So my name is Sam, and quick overview of my background. So here are some logos of places that I have worked. I come from a software engineering background and transitioned into product management software engineering background at the first logo. I spent a number of years there doing full stack development, working on an English and Spanish language learning site. Loved the product side of the house, transitioned into product after a few twists and turns in my career at Osmosis, which is the second logo there. That's an online medical learning platform. Also worked in product at Mapbox, which is a geospatial services company that powers a lot of apps you might be familiar with, like Strava, Shopify, other really big brands that have a huge mapping engine underneath the hood. And more recently, I have found myself at a place called User Interviews, which is a company that builds products to facilitate people talking to their users. So we have one product that has a huge public panel where if you're having trouble recruiting people to talk to, we'll get you set up with the right people. And we have another product, the one that I focus on, which is for talking to your own users and managing the logistics and coordination of making sure that you're talking to the right ones of your users, not spamming them with too many invitations to talk, et cetera, and really getting value out of those customer panels over time. I was supposed to switch this slide. This is a quick peek at the products that I work on right now. Other reason you should listen to me is I really like to read, and there's many resources that I'm drawing from for the tips that I'm going to present today. The main one that I want to highlight is Teresa Torres. I don't think this presentation would exist without me having read her book and learned a lot of the techniques that she offers. So if you like what I'm talking about, definitely check out her work. A couple others that I've listed here that are relevant to this area as well. So this question, I hope our users actually want this. What are we going to work on today? So I'm hoping you walk away from this session feeling more confident that you can translate from research objectives into interview questions. Feel more comfortable facilitating to uncover concrete user stories and, of course, distilling insights that are actionable and useful as you go. I will caveat this by saying this is a limited amount of time today, so I'll be spending most of my time on the first two, and we'll see how far we get into the into the third one. So that might be a little bit more of a teaser, and we'll see how far we get. Awesome. And let's see. So just zooming out for a second, user research is a huge area. I'm a product manager. I'm not a professional full-time user researcher, but I do research as part of my job and work with researchers, work with designers that are doing research as well. There's a huge toolkit, as Jason mentioned, that falls under the category of doing user research, a lot of different methods. The main two sort of categories that I want to touch on are, we have discovery or generative research, where you're trying to go broad, go big picture, understand opportunities and problems that you can address, which is very different than evaluative research methods, which is where you're testing the efficacy of solutions that you're developing. So today's workshop is really only going to focus in on the discovery side and specifically generative user interviews, which is bolded here. And all of the other things you see on this scene are sort of out of scope for what I'm going to talk about today, but could be their own workshops in themselves. Okay, so first things first, designing the interviews. This is so important to try to make sure that you're asking the right questions. And I want to frame the entire process of doing user interviews with this idea, starting with the end in mind. So first, we ask why. What is the goal or outcome that we're working toward? that we need some information or insights to support. So often this will be some kind of business goal, a product outcome, high level objectives. The next question that I like to frame is what decision needs to be made? And this is really important. If you skip this step, it can be really easy to get lost in learning things about your users without having it tied directly to some actionable step that you want to take at the end. So trying to think upfront, what is the decision that we're trying to make here? And then, of course, what do we need to know in order to make that decision? So what goals do we have to learn? I call these research questions. And then, of course, coming up with a plan to get the question answered. So this is the methodology part. How are you going to figure out the answers to those questions? And finally, thinking ahead to at the end of this project, what are the next actions that are going to happen? Do you have a hypothesis? So often what I'll do is I'll kind of think through a decision tree before I even get started on a new project, a new research project, and say, okay, this is what I'm trying to learn. If I learn X, I'll probably make decision Y. If I learn something else, I'll make decision Z, and kind of preemptively think through what is going to happen on the other side of this project. And I'll often use these prompts and actually write out my thoughts for all of these and use that as a starting point to kick off conversations with other stakeholders that are going to be involved. And often that can kick off really good discussions with them, especially to uncover misalignment at the beginning. Okay, so this is the part where I ask you to get involved. So I have thrown together a virtual worksheet with descriptions of these activities. So if you'd like a place to jot down your notes, you can go to tinyurl.com/54RNA5HM. Let me drop this link in the chat as well. This is just a copy of the prompt, but then some space for you to jot down some notes. And later we'll do some breakout rooms, which will give you the instructions there too, in case you want to reference them. And I would love for us to put on our product hats and basically come with me on an example. So I want you to imagine that you work for Spotify. Congrats on your new job. Your objective for the quarter is to increase the number of times that users share a playlist. So your goal here, your overarching objective, is to decide what opportunity to pursue next. So I'm trying to give you the framing here of that why and what is the decision you need to make. And the next thing we're going to do is talk about what you need to learn to make that decision. So I'm just going to pause for 2 minutes and let everyone individually think about this prompt, jot down some notes. You can make a copy of the worksheet so you can have your own. And then we'll reconvene. So go ahead and take 2 minutes right now and do that. We got about 10 more seconds. Feel free to wrap up your thoughts. All right, I'd love to hear what y'all came up with.
My first thought as a Spotify user was, how do I share? So my first question was, how easy is it to share?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. What else do we need to learn?
I think this music's a very emotional thing, so this is quite fascinating. I think people create lists for sort of what motivates people to create a list in the first place, and then what is the barrier from you sharing, or how might you benefit from sharing, and how might you feel if you share it? You might make other people happy. Those are some of the things that I would want to explore.
Very
I
nice.
am. I would be digging into the context when they're listening in, most likely to share. So think about a time when you've shared a playlist with someone before. What were you doing then?
Yeah, I think it's also critical to figure out who they're sharing with. What is the relationship with the sharee?
Yeah,
I was wondering.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing that came to mind for me is, right, is it did I make the playlist, or is it something that was recommended for me? So, some right to that personal element, I built a playlist and now I want to share it with my friends, versus Spotify said this one is something I would like to listen to.
I was also going to say something similar into those lines, like how much even exposure does each playlist has on Spotify, so people can discover, because like I use Spotify all the time and I find like these random playlists that I'm like, man, this is awesome. And I share it with my husband sometimes, but it's like by the content of the, the songs and like how much exposure I will say, like, we will need for those playlists to be, fine for the user, by the user.
Yeah.
The first thing that came to my mind is, why do I want to share? Or why does anybody want to share songs?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, these are great questions. If you have more and you haven't had a chance to shout it out, you can feel free to drop it in the chat. But yes, at a high level, what we're looking for here, we're looking for what's motivating people, what are the emotions associated with it, what is the context of a moment of sharing music, whether that's a relationship, where you found the playlist, what's in the playlist. These kinds of questions are awesome. So yeah, I think we're on the right track in terms of understanding what is it that we need to learn. So the next part of the process is to figure out, okay, how are we going to learn the answers to those questions? And I think one of the biggest light bulb moments for me when I was learning how to do research was that I often do not want to ask my learning or research questions directly to the people that I'm talking to. And honestly, if you remember nothing else from this talk, I would hope that you remember this. Research questions are not the same as interview questions, and we often have to be clever about the way we design our interview questions to solicit the answers to our research questions. It's just kind of the same as saying, like, if I want to know how much someone will pay for something, I'm not just going to ask, how much are you going to pay for this? You got to get a little bit more sneaky with the way that you try and understand people's actual behavior. So let's talk about how to write interview questions. So here's some examples of interview questions that are not so great. Do you go to the gym? How often do you go to the gym? How likely are you to go to the gym in the next 2 weeks? Would offering a towel service make you want to go to the gym more often? Just kind of like, would you pay for this? Have you heard of Planet Fitness, actually? And so I'm wondering if y'all could just shout out, what is going wrong with these types of questions?
I feel like I'm being sold.
Questions.
They're leading.
And they're too specific. So, right, they're targeted towards you're seeking in the outcome. So rather than lead, I don't want to say leading, but like offering them to tell you the story.
Yeah, you're better off with open-ended questions as opposed to yes, no.
Are they a little bit supply sidey? I mean, so they're saying, how do you like what we got, instead of looking at what progress people want to make?
I think also they're not really getting down to the core information you're trying to discover, just kind of wasting time.
Yeah, so lots of different things that are not great about these questions. So they're definitely leading. There's other things happening too. So a lot of these questions are very much asking folks to generalize about their behavior. And as humans, we have amazing imaginations, aspirations. Asking a question like, how likely are you to go to the gym in the next 2 weeks? I mean, do we really think that we're going to answer that question honestly, or that matches with the reality of what actually happens in the future? So there's a lot of room here for speculation, or kind of like leading people towards certain answers. And of course, people feeling sold to, that you kind of have a different agenda and not just listening to their stories. So these questions, not so great. All right, let's talk about what might work a little bit better in this scenario. Some people already suggested something a little bit like this. So could you think of a time when you wanted to exercise? What did you do first? Could you walk me through the last time that you went to a gym? So can y'all tell me what is going better here?
You're making your survey to talk more, kind of reveal what they want to do if they want to exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It's asking actual facts of how did they behave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see a lot of folks in the chat saying drawing on experience, getting them into storytelling mode, get them talking by starting with the story. Yeah, exactly. So what we're doing here is asking about specific previous experiences and really encouraging storytelling. So concrete examples, can you think of an example of when you did something, walk me through your process, etc. That's the kind of stuff that we're going for here. Okay, so that being said, we kind of have an idea of what we're aiming for. So I'm gonna give you a chance to try this out. This is also on that worksheet, the activities doc. How might you translate the research question? So there's a lot of different research questions you have for the initial prompt. So I've sort of picked one to have us focus on the same area. What motivates users to share music is our learning goal. And how might you translate that into some interview questions? So I'm actually going to give you a couple minutes to jot down your notes individually, and then we'll go into breakout rooms and you can talk about how to translate those questions. All right, so we're gonna jump into some breakout rooms. We're gonna go into groups of 3, so your instructions are on that sheet, but basically for each person, take 1 minute to share what you came up with. For each person, go ahead and rotate around that group of 3, and then 1 more minute to have sort of an open discussion about how you can improve your questions or which ones you thought were working really well as well. With that, Jason, go ahead and hit the button. Hey, Vix, we'll give everyone a second to come back to the main room.
Not enough time, Sam.
Not enough time? Good discussions happening?
Yep.
What kinds of questions did folks come up with?
We talked about cassette tapes and CDs as well.
Wait, what are those?
Wow. I'm glad you said it, not me.
No, I'm kidding. I had a cassette tape in my first car.
Talking about those fun devices that you have to count the number of times you wind it with a pencil in order to find the timestamp?
At least you didn't mention 8-track tapes, I don't think.
Yeah, but that was the first time people could make a mixtape, right?
Yep. Or when you heard a song on the radio you really liked, but you forgot to hit record, and you had to wait
Mhm.
until the next day or so to record it.
Except that you couldn't record at that time because the DJ talked over the first 20 seconds of the song.
I had so many recordings of Casey Kasem.
All right.
I
Well,
went to King Biscuit, but anyway.
James, like, we need to bring this back here.
as much as I would love to reminisce about pre-internet music era, which I think is a super creative way to get people talking about their relationship with music. Like I think y'all are doing a great job of digging into this. But for the interest of time, I would love to keep us moving forward so we can get to the second activity. Yeah, so any other question, like specifically interview questions that y'all came up with and jotted down?
I had tell me about a time that music brought back a memory.
Nice.
I think that's where we're going, Sam, too, is understanding I think I would like to understand is why do you have playlists? Because one of the things we talked about is some of us don't do playlists. We're like, I search for workout music. I search for this. I search for that. I'm too lazy to create a playlist. My daughter loves to create playlists for gymnastics, playlists for studying, playlists for calming, one after another. And so I think understanding the root of why do you even have a playlist, what motivates you, what's there, what feelings did that bring, then tying that into sharing.
Yeah. Great
I will share
discussion,
the
sounds
one-
like.
I will share the ones from my team. We have a couple. So we have, tell me about a time when you found a playlist and you just listened to over and over and over. We had, how do you store your favorite music? Like, do you put it on, like, do you create your playlist or you just, how do you do that? We also have, tell me about the last time that you listened music, how that made you feel and what were the emotions behind it. We have, tell me about a time in the past when you share music with others, what made them share it. And we were thinking about saying cassettes and like not even the tech side of that we have now. And the last question that we had is, tell me about a time when you share something from your phone. How did you do it? And yeah, so those were the questions in our group.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I see some more in the chat as well. Tell me about the last person you shared a playlist with and why you chose to share with them. Tell me about the most recent time you shared a playlist. Yeah, these are great questions. Just some quick notes. So the ones that are asking about a specific example are going to really help you uncover stories. The ones that are a little more broad might be harder to control the scope or direct the conversation, right? So sort of the difference between, why do you create playlists in general versus tell me about a playlist specifically and why you created that playlist. So really trying to hone in for stories and saying like, can you walk me through the last time that a share happened, right? Stuff like that. I also noticed some of the questions are a little more general about sentiment towards how people interact with music. For the scope of this question, which is what motivates users to share music, I think the questions that are more focused on a moment when you shared something will probably get you to that answer faster. But really nice job with your questions. All right, love how talkative this group is. Definitely feel like the third section will be just a teaser, but I'd love to go through some quick tips on how to conduct interviews. Just some overarching tips that you can use. Hopefully these are very actionable and you can put them into practice the next time that you're talking to a customer. I'll go through a couple and then we're going to do some mock interviews. So first things first is I love interviewing as a team. Often you can get people that are in different types of roles on the call too, that will add different perspective when you're interpreting what you learned from these calls. But generally, as I do interviews with multiple people, we'll assign roles before we get on the call. So one person will be the moderator. They're in charge of sort of steering the interview, making the interviewee or the participant feel comfortable, obviously asking the questions, but also keeping track of time, keeping the conversation targeted towards what you need to learn, etc. Note-taking, very important, is having someone to help you take notes. If you don't have someone, you can record your session and take notes later. But if you have a team, it's really helpful to have someone that does not have to focus on what the next part of the conversation is and can just listen and absorb and pull out insights. And then it can also be great to have observers on the call as well, especially if someone's going to be working in that problem area with you, like a teammate. And they're going to typically be contributing to notes and synthesis, but taking a little bit more of a backseat. I'm seeing some chats go by. If you have an urgent question that you want me to pause and answer, feel free to shout it out. Otherwise, I'll loop back to these at the end. Okay, 3 quick moderating techniques that you can work on. 1, holding space and silence. 2, listen reflectively. And 3, guiding people towards stories. So I'll go through each of these. Holding space and silence. This can be a tough one. We have a natural instinct to want to fill the conversational space, but what we're trying to do here is allowing people to process your question and think of an answer. So giving them a second to understand what you just asked them. And you're trying to hold space as well and create a sense of psychological safety for them to share about their real experiences and elaborate. Okay, how do we do this? So obviously you can count out the seconds. This can help you slow down. So counting to 7 in your head, which I swear feels like an eternity, but with practice, it gets easier. And one of my favorites is actually using a prop to help you feel less uncomfortable with the silence. So taking a sip of water or coffee or tea, whatever you've got. Next thing is listen reflectively. So what this means is instead of asking a question, they answer the question, then you ask the next question. Before you move on, you'll listen to what they said and echo it back to them. What this is going to do is check for understanding. So it's a great opportunity for them to say, oh no, you didn't understand quite right. Let me re-explain it to you. It also really makes people feel heard. Having someone echo back what you said can basically like psychologically feel like you're on the same wavelength, like you're mirroring them, and feel validated in what they're sharing with you. And you can use these types of phrases to encourage them to elaborate or share more or guide them to the next part of the story. So in practice, this can look like phrases like, oh, it sounds like what you just said is, and then you summarize what you heard. Or, oh, what I'm hearing is X, Y, and Z are the things that are most important to you in this situation. Or let me check if I understand. It sounds like you started by doing this, and then you did that, and then you did that. Is that about right? And you're giving them opportunities to sort of affirm that you're understanding their experience. And I think the biggest thing here is just to sit with the deep belief that you don't have as much insight into their experience as they do. And it's easy to just think like, oh yeah, I understood what they said, but really slowing down and trying to make sure you've got it can help you pull out insights that you would otherwise miss. And finally, guiding folks towards stories. So we kind of talked about this a bit already, but trying to get information about users' actual behavior, not what they think their behavior might be in the future, and trying to redirect them from generalizations to more concrete past experiences. So when they say, oh yeah, I usually go to the gym on Thursdays, you can say, oh, did you go last Thursday? Can you tell me about what happened when you went last Thursday, if that's the case? Yes, do you have an example? What was the first step you took there? Oh, tell me what happened next after you did that, stuff like that. Okay, so now we get to go ahead and give it a shot. So with the interview questions that you talked about in the last breakout session, we're going to actually just do some mock interviews. So basically what I'd like is for us to get into groups of 3. Hopefully we can get 3 people in each breakout room. What we're going to do is you're going to start with a role: moderator, participant, and note taker. So each person gets 3 minutes to practice moderating, 2 or 3 minutes. Then after you do this session, I'd like the moderator to turn off their camera and audio and remain silent while the other 2 folks on the call sort of debrief and talk about what they did well and what they could improve on in their moderating, and get that quick peer feedback from each other. And then you can turn your camera back on and have a quick touching base on what you learned from your feedback. So we'll go ahead and get into breakout rooms and give it a shot. I'm going to ask for you all to please keep an eye on the time and let you manage those transitions yourself, so I don't have to be sending messages every couple of minutes. So go ahead and take a shot at it.
Here they come.
The worst experience ever.
Yeah, I know. What I tell you. Getting cut off mid-sentence is no fun.
All right, cool. Welcome back, everyone. So as you can tell, I wasn't prepared for a group that's this engaged. So thank you so much for engaging and asking questions and sharing your thoughts here. So obviously we didn't get to the third part, but I will share the slides out. So if you want to take a peek through, happy to chat with y'all, afterwards. If you want to send me some LinkedIn messages that we can talk about synthesis. But yeah, just to kind of close out, I'll give us like a minute or two to, if anyone wants to share any takeaways about how the exercise went.
I just have a question, Sam. What are some ways that you can start an interview? Like, how can you best go about starting an interview? I find that I struggle a little bit with that.
Kind of how do you warm up your interviewee?
Yeah.
Kind of question. Yeah, I guess I can offer one, just start with softballs. Like I'll usually open the call and be like, hey, thanks for joining. Where are you calling in from? Just kind of try to get them to loosen up a little bit. And then I'll try and give them easy questions that don't require a lot of thinking and not a lot of opening up. So often I'll repeat my screener questions like, oh, can you tell me about your current role and what your team looks like? So just like easy day-to-day about you questions, and that can kind of get them talking. And then, as you design your questions, you want to be mindful if you're asking for really intense stories, like build towards that, don't lead with it.
And let's say you're mid-interview and you get stuck. What's a great way to get unstuck or pull yourself out and come back up for air?
One, it's normal to get stuck. Like interviewing is a skill. Like I am still getting better all the time, and it's okay if you're like, man, I just didn't have a very good interview. Like you'll get it on the next one, kind of thing. Two is you can definitely just like move on to your next question if you're having trouble. If you run out of questions, I'll sometimes just be like, do you have any other things that frustrate you about the product that I'm working on? And let them just vent about all the things that annoy them. Or I'll just close the interview and say like, okay, I need to go rework my interview questions. I had, my pacing was off, and I'll go add more or cut questions or things like that. But yeah, for the interest of time, I'll hang out afterwards if you want to talk more about getting unstuck. But I'll invite you to think about this question here. Hopefully you learned something that you can apply. If there's something you can apply tomorrow or in the next 2 days, I would love for you to like think about that and put that in your mind. And then in the next 2 weeks and 2 months as well. And then just closing out with a huge thank you for having me. Really enjoyed all the energy. I'm not really a morning person, so y'all are giving me life. And yeah, I'll hand it back to Jason to close out.
Thanks so much, Sam. We I see a couple of folks making some comments. I saw Kurt had to jump off because he's preparing for some interviews today and said, I'm tweaking my questions right now. So I think that's some really strong feedback right there. So thank you so much. And we'll also drop the slides and the materials we keep an event archive page. And that archive page is available for free to all of our community members. So if you join our free community at productcoffee.com, you'll get access to that event archive page. Usability is improving rapidly on that. It's terrible right now, but we're getting it there. Thanks a lot for joining us today.